Hello! Welcome back to the Good Trash Garbage Chute, where members of the GoodTrash Media team go to the movies and talk about new releases that are coming out, or are new to streaming. Today we're going to be taking a look at a new film from director Bradley Cooper. It is his third feature film starring Will Arnett and Laura Dern, and it is called Is This Thing On? Is This Thing On is a Searchlight production. It is rated R for language, adult content, and sexual situations, and it runs approximately 2 hours. It is the third feature film from Bradley Cooper, who made his move into the director's chair with the acclaimed A Star Is Born remake, starring himself, Bradley Cooper, Lady Gaga, and Sam Elliott, and others. He followed that up with Maestro for Netflix, with himself again starring in the key role there alongside Carey Mulligan. And so now we've got his third feature film, one that is much different to his previous films. Is This Thing On is a fairly streamlined effort from the director, much different from his previous work. If you have seen A Star Is Born or if you saw Maestro, this is a much more stripped down film. I'm going to give you a synopsis of the movie from Searchlight. I am going to then just give you some thoughts on the movie, whether you should see it, what I think about it, and then we'll go from there. As their marriage quietly unravels, Alex, played by Will Arnett, faces middle age and an impending divorce. Seeking new purpose in the New York comedy scene, while Tess, played by Laura Dern, confronts the sacrifices she made for their family, forcing them to navigate co-parenting, identity, and whether love can take a new form. Again, directed by Bradley Cooper, written by Bradley Cooper, Will Arnett, and Mark Chappell, produced by Cooper, Weston Middleton, Will Arnett, and Chris Theicher, and then starring Will Arnett, Laura Dern, Andra Day, Bradley Cooper, Amy Sedaris, Sean Hayes, Christine Eversole, Kieran Hines, and Scott Isinogle. Is This Thing On is a fascinating departure for Cooper. Again, if you have seen A Star Is Born or if you have seen Maestro, Maestro is a very bombastic movie in style and in construction and in composition. I wouldn't call A Star Is Born bombastic, but it is a bigger film. It was a huge debut for Cooper. He scored acting nominations for his performance in that film. He was lauded as his director on that, his debut effort. And it was a big movie. The sheer inclusion of Lady Gaga in that film elevated it to blockbuster sort of status. And it was a very commercially viable film. Very well regarded, well received, and critically across the board, well remembered. For that to be the, I believe, fourth remake of that story of it as of A Star Is Born, a story that we go to every couple of decades or every few decades, was quite successful. Maestro didn't see quite the same success. Obviously, Netflix got behind it in a big way, but many critics sort of called it indulgent, maybe awards baity, Oscar baity. Some felt it was a masterwork, one of the best movies of the year. I was not keen on Maestro. I love A Star Is Born. A Star Is Born may be in my top 100 films of all time. I think it's a powerful work. I think Cooper does a great job, both in front of and behind the camera. When I saw the trailers for Is This Thing On, though, I was, one, surprised because it seemed stripped down, and two, excited because it stars Will Arnett. When I was in college, I fell in love with Arrested Development. And if you've seen Arrested Development, hopefully you love Arrested Development. I don't know that there's not a better comedy that's been put on television than those first 3 seasons of Arrested Development. It's layered, it's nuanced, it's clever, it's absurd. It is all of the things. It rewards rewatching. It's quotable. It's a great time. And that's where I first met, or not meet, but where I first encountered Will Arnett as the brother Job of the main character played by Jason Bateman, Michael. And Job is goofy, egotistical, kind of dumb, and Will Arnett played him to great lengths in all those capacities. and he's a very funny person to just listen to. Jason Bateman, Sean Hayes co-host the podcast Smartless, which is also very fun to listen to. Will Arnett voiced Lego Batman. He is the voice of GMC, of Reese's, and so he has made a name for himself in comedy, in commercials, in these different avenues of podcasting. And so to see him taking on this more dramatic role was interesting and exciting. The sort of core concept here of this man struggling to find himself post, in the middle of a separation, what is he going to do with his life? Sort of a midlife crisis moment for him, to just sort of take up stand-up comedy, I think is a really fun concept. And it's based on a true story. Arnett has, I've listened to him in a podcast talking about the source of this. He met this comic who does what the main character in this movie does, which was went to a pub, couldn't afford the cover, and decided to do the open mic so he could get in for free. And that basis of just, showing up lost and then finding a space in comedy is really cool. It's, again, the third film that Cooper has tackled that's dealing with creatives in a way, artists. Obviously much more directly in A Star is Born and Maestro. But here he's dealing with it, as somebody who is not expecting anything out of this, right? He is sort of raw or naive or innocent. There's a couple of characters who reference his innocence as a comic in this movie, and I think that's very interesting. And so it is about a comic, but it's not a comedy. And that is one of the things to take away from this. It is very much a drama. It is very much a husband and a wife going through it, trying to figure out themselves. And it's not just Will Arnett's character, Alex. It is both of the characters, Will Arnett and Laura Dern's character here as well, who are trying to figure out what to do with their life and where to go in the next phase of this moment. And so it's navigating relationships at a sort of midlife point, relationships that have existed for 10, 15 years, and I think Cooper's doing some really interesting stuff with that. There's I've noticed a trend this year in films, wrestling with ideas of grace and forgiveness and what to do and what would you do. And this thing is doing some of that as well. I think it's well acted. Of course, Laura Dern's one of the greats. Will Arnett holds his own right alongside her. I think he does a fantastic job here, both as, fledgling, getting his feet wet comic, but also as just a guy who's a bit in over his head and doesn't know how to navigate these relationships and, what he's going to do next and the awkwardness that sort of comes alongside that. And having been in moments in my own relationship with my wife where things were very stormy, some of that resonates fairly well with me. And so this, again, though, is a much more stripped down, much smaller sort of film compared to Cooper's previous efforts. Cooper does show up here in a few scenes in a supporting role as a friend from college who's still in the life of these characters and does a great job. Cooper's, I think, a fantastic actor, and I love when he shows up. And, to see his growth both behind the camera and in front of the camera has been really fun to watch. And Cooper and Arnett go way back. If you listen to interviews or read interviews with them, they lived together a long time ago, and Arnett helped Cooper get through some stuff in his life, and so they've been close friends for a very long time. And it's cool to see this project coming together where Cooper's able to help his friend out and do something different, in his point in his career. So it is, it is got comedy in it, but it's not a funny movie. I mean, it's not a comedy. It has comical moments, but it's not a comedy. Has a lot of emotional moments. And it's got a very strong emotional core. It feels maybe a little flat, and I don't know if that's just the sort of range of the film, the scope of the film. Again, it takes place, there's no delineated timeline over the course of a few months, I think is kind of what we understand. but it is it's a solid watch. I really enjoy this one, and I don't know that I'll go back to it often, but I really appreciate it for what it is. I think I like it more than Maestro fairly well. Didn't love Maestro. I think Star is Born is still the movie of Bradley Cooper's film, directing career, and even as a performance, I think he's one of his best performances is in A Star is Born. But I think this is a solid effort. It shows a range from Cooper to be able to have some restraint and to have some even-keeled approaches to filmmaking. He's not going for broke with every move and every moment and every scene. And I think that helps this settle in a nice space. Should you see it? I think that if you are into relationship dramas, breakups, divorces, trying to reconcile that, trying to, following characters who are trying to figure out where they are in their lives, this may be worth a watch for you. I think that it is a fairly easy watch, but it's a lot of just, people sit around talking and doing stuff, obviously monologuing at comedy clubs. I don't know that it explores anything new with relationships other than where it ends. I think that's maybe one of the more special things about it. And so I would recommend it because I like everybody involved here. I think that it is worth seeing. But if you're uncertain, then definitely wait for it to go to streaming. Don't feel like you have to rush to pay $15, $20 for a, nighttime ticket of this. If you wanted to catch a matinee, I think it'd be right for a matinee. Otherwise, I think, wait for streaming to catch up with this one. I don't think you're going to miss much, but it is a solid effort. And I appreciate that about it. So there you have it. Those are some of my thoughts on Searchlight's Is This Thing On? Directed and written by Bradley Cooper, co-written by Bradley Cooper, starring Will Arnett, Laura Dern. Let me know what you think. If you get a chance to see it, give me your thoughts. You can share those thoughts. Otherwise, I will see you next time down the garbage chute.